From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Our next author, I want to read just a little bit of, I think it's her new book. And this is a scene where a bad guy has just dispatched someone in a rather gruesome manner by flinging him out a skyscraper window. And Colleen writes, he listened to the assistant's screams as he dropped floor by floor. Just when the man was about to hit bottom, Lokesh murmured a few words that opened a hole in the ground under his assistant and buried him alive. I love that twist because you think just at the last minute he's going to spare him, but no, he's going to make it even worse for him. Colleen grew up in Arizona, a lifelong reader whose interests included action, adventure, science fiction, and romance. She went to the University of Arizona. She worked as a nationally certified American Sign Language interpreter. She started writing books and publishing them on her own and sold so many, more than 16,000, that publishers took notice and wanted to get in on the action. Her first book was Tiger's Curse. It's been followed by Tiger's Quest, and her new book, the third in the series, is Tiger's Voyage. It will be published this November by Splinter. She also tweets, so if you're on Twitter, you should look up at Colleen Houck, where she says in her little bio, I love YA books, Poodles, Star Trek, Dancing with the Stars, Vampire Diaries, and I have a major crush on Superman. And I looked, and if you go to @CapedCrusader, he says he has a major crush on her. And she's married to someone who went to the same high school I did, so you know that's good, Rockville High. Please welcome Colleen Houck.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here at the convention, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about my publishing story today. We're here in the Cutting Edge Pavilion, which some of you might not know what that is, and you wouldn't be the only one. We're all trying to figure out what are we supposed to talk about at the Cutting Edge Pavilion. And so I think what cutting edge means is the newest thing in books or the newest thing in publishing, what's going to be the future of books and the future of getting published. And I think one of the reasons I was nominated and suggested that I should be here at this thing is because of my unique publishing story. I think for me, when I got published, I kind of did everything backwards. I wrote my book, which is good. That's usually the first thing you should do. And then I took my book and I said, well, let me figure out how I'm supposed to get it to a publisher. And the first thing you have to do is write a query letter. And I don't know if you all know what a query letter is, but it's like a one-paragraph summary of your book. And it better be a really good paragraph if you want that book to get published, because a lot of people will just say, the paragraph's not so good, so it can't be a good book, and whoops, throw it out. So I think I did kind of a not so good job on my first query. Sent it out to some agents and editors to look at, and nobody was really that interested. So I thought, that's okay, I'll just write my second book. And so I wrote my second book, Tiger's Quest, and finished it and did the same thing kind of all over again. And I sent out query letters, and this time I did a little bit better job and got some agents and editors that were interested in looking at it. One by one they passed, though, and so I thought, well, that's okay. I kind of just like writing, and if I just do it as a hobby, that's all right with me. And so I started writing book 3, which is Tiger's Voyage. So one day my husband and I were sitting down and talking, and by that time I had a good group of family and friends who really wanted to read my books. And I didn't really have a way, other than just sending them electronic versions, I didn't really have a way that they could get a hold of my book or buy my book. And so I started looking into self-publishing. And so we talked about it, and I self-published my first 2 books. which is the first backward step. I think most authors would say, don't do that, that's a terrible thing to do. But I self-published my first 2 books in 2009 in the fall. And kind of as a last-minute thought, I put them up as an ebook on Kindle. And at that time, I didn't really know much about ebooks. I didn't know much about Kindle really at all. I didn't have one. I didn't know what it was for. And but that was probably the smartest thing I did, was put it on Kindle. And a couple months went by, and then all of a sudden, I started selling books on Kindle like crazy. And I knew from the very beginning that I needed to have a web presence with my books, because people want to talk to you about it, and they want to write you fan mail. And so I had my little brother help me set up a website, and I started getting fan letters, and which is great. Your first piece of fan mail comes in, and it's really amazing. Like, somebody really likes my book. And I wrote back to every fan. I still try to, but wrote back to every fan who wrote me a letter. And I said, thank you so much for liking my book, and here's what you can do to help me. And so I had all these people writing in reviews for me, and going to Costco and asking Costco to carry my books, and going to Walmart and ask Walmart to carry my books. And I had a lot of really great fans that actually did that stuff for me. So another month or 2 went by, and I had some foreign publishers contact me and say, we want to publish your book in our country. And it's very exciting. It's very thrilling. But I didn't really know how to negotiate contracts. I didn't have any knowledge of that or information. I didn't know who to ask for help. But I went ahead and I signed contracts with 3 countries, with China and with Thailand and Korea. And then, wow, it's very loud in these other pavilions. So I signed contracts with these other countries, and then I had a fellow from Hollywood call me and say, I'd like to meet you. And he flew up from Los Angeles to meet with me and my husband, and took us out to lunch, and we talked about tigers and about books, and I told him my whole story arc from A to Z. It took about 3 hours, and this was going to happen in Tiger's Curse and in Tiger's Quest and in Tiger's Destiny. Let me tell you what happens at the very end, and wow, what do you think? And he was like overwhelmed, and he didn't quite know what to do. But so he made an offer for purchasing the option rights for the books for film. And so again, that's kind of a backwards thing. That usually comes after you have an agent and after you have a publishing deal. And then it was just like a couple weeks, I think, later when I was contacted by my agent, Alex Glass, who's here somewhere, I think. Oh, he's right there. And he called me on the phone, and he said, I'm really interested in representing you. And I said, are you sure? Because this is a romance book, and you're a guy, and I just don't think a guy would really understand or appreciate a romance book. And he's like, no, seriously, I really want to represent you. And so I said, why don't you finish the book and call me back tomorrow? And he did. And so he offered me representation. And then it was not just a few weeks later that he was contacted by Cindy Lowe, and they started negotiating to sell my books to a company called Sterling, which is affiliated with Barnes & Noble. And the cool thing about Sterling is they were mostly doing children's books at the time, and they had decided they wanted to set up a new young adult imprint. So an imprint's kind of like a wing of a publishing house. So all, like, for example, Penguin has Razor Bill, so it's kind of underneath Penguin. Penguin's the big umbrella. So Sterling's the big umbrella, and their new young adult section was going to be called Splinter, and they were looking for a young adult author or a series that they could use to kick off their new imprint. And so they found my books and said, this is what we're looking for. And we were able to make a deal very quickly. And not only were we able to make a deal very quickly, but they also came up with a very aggressive plan to get the books out to fans very fast. By that time, I had finished Tiger's Voyage, which was book 3. So all the self-published books came down off the market, and then they went through editing process and cover design, and we were able to get the books back out within just a couple months. It was back out. So Tiger's Curse, the Sterling edition, was published in January of this year and went to New York Times bestseller. And Tiger's Quest, which is book 2, came out in June and also went to New York Times bestseller. And now we're going to hit number 3 in just a couple weeks. The third book's going to come out, and that's Tiger's Voyage, which will hit the stores on November 1st. So it's been kind of a crazy, fast-paced year for me. So I'll be heading out on my third book tour in a couple weeks. And at the same time, I'm trying to hurry and finish my 4th book, which we've already sold, which is going to come out next summer. I can say that? Yes, next summer. And that'll be called Tiger's Destiny. And then we'll have one more, the last book, which is Tiger's Dream, coming out. We don't know when, because I haven't even started that one yet. So it's kind of, I think, being here in the cutting edge is kind of a blessing and something interesting and different for me. I never really thought of myself as a cutting edge kind of person, but I think the interesting way that I got published is kind of going to become more and more popular. I think that agents might start shopping in self-published books more and more now, because you've already got a built-in audience there. You've already got some proof of that you can sustain interest in your work, and it just kind of makes sense. At the time that I self-published, the Nook, the Barnes & Noble, didn't allow a self-published author to publish their work, and now they do. And so I think that's becoming more and more a way where an author can start to generate a fan base and can start to try out what they're doing and see if they can be successful at it. So I think it's a wave of the future that is coming, and I think it's coming fast, and it's a wonderful thing. So let me tell you a little bit about my series. I started writing Tiger's Curse pretty much, let's see, my sister brought over Twilight for me to read, and she said, "You really need to read this book." And I said, "What's it about?" And she said, "It's a vampire teenage romance book." And I said, "Oh, that's not really for me." And she said, no, trust me, you need to read this book." And I said, "Oh, okay, fine." And so I read the book and set it down. I was like, oh, I loved it. I finished it in like one night. It was on a Sunday night. And then the next day I had to go to work. So during my lunch break, I ran over to my bookstore. I only had 10 minutes. I had to hurry, and bought New Moon and Eclipse. And I finished those in 2 days. And then I was like, what's going to happen now? Is she going to pick Edward, or is she going to pick Jacob? And I didn't know, and it was very troublesome. And I felt like I was a teenager all over again. And I wished I had had those books when I was a teenager, because I would have bought the posters and the jewelry and the makeup and whatever they sell. I would have bought it all. Trust me, I bought everything New Kids on the Block, so I buy everything. And so I had these books, and they were like speaking to me still. And I thought, wow, nobody else is writing books like this. This is just crazy good, and I loved it. And so that day I looked up Stephanie Meyer on her website, and I found out she was just a mom who had an interesting dream one night and got up and started writing a book. And most of us know the story of J.K. Rowling, where she was scribbling on her, in her coffee shop, writing on a napkin to write Harry Potter. And so those two women were kind of just living their lives, and all of a sudden everything about what they were going to do with their lives changed. And so their courage to try something like that gave me the impetus I needed to actually go for it. And I've always, written on my New Year's resolution, I want to write a book someday, but I never did. I just talked about it. And I thought, well, maybe I should do it. Maybe I should try. And so those two women were the ones who gave me the gumption to actually sit down with a pad of paper and a pencil and start sketching out my series. So I knew I wanted to use a theme for my books, and so I picked the story of Beauty and the Beast, because that the Beast wasn't just a handsome prince who had everything and then he just gave the girl a slipper and they had a happy ever after. The Beast was complicated. He was complex. There was something wrong there. There was a flaw in his character that had to be fixed. And so I picked a Beauty and the Beast theme, and then I started thinking about what kind of beast I wanted to use. And I didn't want to do a vampire or werewolf. And I was like, well, okay, maybe I could do a bird. But then Lady Hawk was done a long time ago. You teenagers don't know that one, but that was, a good one. And that was already done. And I was thinking, well, maybe I should use a bear. But bears are not very sexy. They're kind of stinky. So I was like, well, how about a cat? And thought about a lion for a while, but I've been close to a lion, and they're not so smelling fresh either. And so I ended up picking a tiger. And I thought, well, what's better than a orange tiger is a white tiger, because there's something magical and special about a white tiger. And kind of like a unicorn. It's something interesting and different, and it's almost not real. There's something that captures your imagination. So I picked a white tiger, and then I thought I'd set my books in Russia, because I thought that white tigers came from Russia, and they run in the snow and catch deer, and that's not true. I did some research, and I was like, oh, tigers are from India, the white tiger from India, and found out that all the white tigers came from one cub that was caught in India. He was a Bengal cub, and he was brought to America and bred with his daughters and granddaughters until they started a white line. So all white tigers come from him, and so all white tigers today have at least a little bit of Bengal left in them. So I picked a white tiger and started researching myths and tiger stories and anything that I could find about India, what kind of things and stories I could find. And I came across a story of the goddess Durga, who rode a tiger into battle. And there was something about her story that sparked, and it just triggered my imagination. And so I started researching her more and more, and my stories started growing from there. And I'm an organization freak. I can't write just from the seat of my pants. I have to plot out things. So I've known how my story was going to end up from the first chapter of my first book. I knew exactly where I was going to go, and I just had to figure out how I was going to get there. So for me, the writing journey is kind of like I live in Los Angeles, and I want to get to New York, but there's a lot of ways you can get there. And I was kind of leaving myself open to how I would get there, but I always knew I would get to New York eventually. And so that's kind of how I write. I kind of set up a chapter. I kind of want to write about this.
But yet you were contacted by 3 countries. How did you go into those agreements that fulfilled your needs and benefited you and then not them?
Well, like I said, I didn't have any experience with literature contracts at all. And so now I know a little bit better. So if you're going to go into that, you should hire a literary lawyer that knows what they're doing to go through that with you. At the time, I said, Dad, can you look at this and tell me what you think? And Dad doesn't know either. And I hired a local lawyer in Portland, and he doesn't know those kind of things. So I would say find yourself a literary a lawyer that can help you go through those kinds of things if you're getting to that point. And again, I didn't contact any of them. They all came to me. So I wasn't aggressively seeking to publish my books in other countries. And from that point on, after I did get published through Sterling, my agent handles all that stuff now. So I would say the priority should be getting an agent, really, because that's the best thing. But if you can't, and it doesn't work out that way, and you do get contacted, try to find a literary lawyer to help you out. Sure. Yes.
Have you had any experiences with fans who write their own stories in your world, fan fiction, or what do you think of them if you have?
Yes, I have a lot of fans that are lovely and that write fan fiction, and I've even read some of them online, and they're really good and they're really cute. And I love my fans. I think fan fiction is a great way if you want to be a writer to get started writing, because you already have the characters that you know. Like if you're going to write fan fiction for Harry Potter, you already know the characters and they're already defined for you, and you're just practicing story and plot. So I think fan fiction is a great way especially if you're a teenager who wants to get out and start writing. Yes.
So 2 things. First,
Okay.
when are you going to India, or are you going to go try and visit any places you write about? Secondly, can you talk a little bit more about how social networking made an impact on getting to where you are today? Because you've talked, fans did this, but kind of did you and Brad have a plan on, hey, we're going to kind of social network and try to do this, or did it just kind of happen, or how did that all come together?
Yes. India, I have not been to India. I would love to go to India. I have not been yet, but I'm currently renting everything from Bollywood ever produced. So I'm trying to get a good feel for it. But I would like to go someday. So maybe we will. For social media, I wasn't really I didn't have a Facebook account when I started. I technically still don't. I kind of go in the back way through my husband's Facebook account now. And Twitter, I had no idea what Twitter was. And so when I got traditionally published, said, you need to start Twittering. I'm like, what's a Twitter? And so I started having to do that. In the beginning, though, it was all kind of just email, back and forth with fans, and even some snail mail letters. But as far as social media goes, I didn't do too much other than writing back fans in the beginning. So now I'm I do stuff on Goodreads, and I do contests. We do like 3 or 4 contests a month, and I do a blog, which I didn't do before. I'm starting to learn how to blog, and Twitter, trying to learn how to do all that stuff. I still feel like a novice, but I'm learning more and more. So I think it's very, very important as a writer to get your name out there and to connect with your fan base. Yes. Yes.
Is your genre young adult?
Yeah, when I started writing, my intention was to actually write a clean romance for women, because I've always loved romance, but I never, we at work as an interpreter, whenever we weren't working, we'd read. And so, but I didn't want to have a Fabio book at work. Fabio, yes. I didn't want that. And so I wanted kind of a clean romance that I would feel comfortable, with a mom reading with her teenage daughter. And so I actually my thoughts were that I was writing for women, just a clean romance for women. And but my protagonist, my Kelsey character, was 17, turning 18, and that kind of slides you into young adult. But I've had kids as young as 9 reading them, and ladies as old as 78 reading them and writing me fan mail. So I think it applies to a large crowd. I couldn't hear you. Can you say that again?
Yes. Do you feel like the cutting edge for what's coming up, like it was vampires and
Yeah, as far as subject material in the future, yeah, I at the time I was writing, I felt like vampires were overly done everywhere. And though I loved the Twilight books, I was like, oh, there's vampires everywhere, there's werewolves everywhere. I wanted something different. But I still like paranormal. I like doing something magical and mysterious and different. I've never really been a huge fan personally of contemporary. But I would say if you're interested in writing, write what you love, because you'll be the most passionate about that, and it'll show in your writing. Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to say that I'm an entertainment reporter, and the reason I'm here is I wrote a story about the next big things after Potter, and I got lots of angry emails from your fans because I had not included your book. So my question to you is, what besides Stephanie Meyer, what are some other young adult or regular novelists who you find are very influential to you personally?
Right now I'm reading everything YA. I didn't read a lot of YA before Twilight, so I didn't know a lot. My favorite books then were like Gone with the Wind and things like that. But since then I've read a ton of YA, and one of my favorite authors right now is the author of Firelight, Sophie Jordan. She's a great writer. She writes adult too, but she wrote Firelight and then Vanish, and she's great. And there's a whole bunch of new things that are coming out. I like Beth Revis, who wrote Across the Universe, And what's new and edgy about her is it's a sci-fi romance, which is not very common. It's a very odd thing to see, but it's something different and new. And I think the young adult genre in particular is so open to incorporating all kinds of different things about writing and introducing kids to a lot more different genres out there. I think it's a great thing. But those are two of my favorites right now. Yes.
Are you thinking about what your next book series is going to be?
Yes, I'm thinking about it a lot. I have a lot of ideas I'd like to explore. It's hard for me to break away from the Tiger books. It's hard for me to switch gears like that. So I don't think I'll do what Stephanie Meyer did and write another book, write The Host in the middle of the others. I have a hard time changing focus. But I'm definitely already turning the wheels and thinking about what's the next thing I want to do. So, but I'm sure that it will still have romance because that's my favorite thing. It'll always have romance. So, yes.
Hi. So when your family and close friends read the book, were they able to see aspects of themselves or your life in it?
Yes. Kelsey's grandmother in the book is very, very similar to my own. And when my cousins read it, that's Grandma Scott right there. Because she made she loved to make us biscuits and gravy, and she had a special quilt she made for all her grandchildren. And they said, that's our grandma. And she's not really she's already passed away when we start off the book, but she was a big influence on Kelsey's grandmother. And then Kelsey's a lot like me. We have a lot of the same loves and interests. We both like Shakespeare and tennis shoes and chocolate and things like that. In book 2, Kelsey goes on a date with a guy named Artie, which I don't know if you've read that one yet, but that's based on a true date that I went on when I was in college. And you can all cry for me later when you read it. But that was pretty much down to the letter, almost exactly what happened on the day. So like I said, you'll really cry when you get to that part. But there are definite, every author incorporates elements of themselves and the things they know into their characters. And so I think there's little pieces of all my friends and family and brothers and sisters all interlaced in there. And the other thing is all of the American characters in the book, secondary characters I've named after my nieces and nephews. So they're really cute. My little 5-year-old nephew, he'll go get a copy of my book at every bookstore they go to visit, and he'll plop it down onto the desk and say, I am in this book. I'm on page 10. That's me, and so they're very proud. And so that's another little piece I've put into all my books. So, okay, are there any more questions? Where everybody knows what's going on. Very good. Let me think of what else I can tell you. So I can tell you a little bit about Tiger's Voyage, which is the next book coming up. Very, very excited about Tiger's Voyage. I saw some people that came up in the signing line that had copies. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Where did you get a copy from? And we've been having contests to give some away. The really cool thing about each book is that my tigers and my girl go to a special city. So in book 1, they go to Kishkinda, which I'm sad for the interpreters that have to spell these names, but they go to Kishkinda for the first book, which is the monkey city from the Jungle Book. But my monkeys are a little bit more dangerous. And in book 2, they go to Shangri-La up in the Himalayas, and that's it's got a lot of danger, but it's kind of a paradise at the same time. And in book 3, is a water book. So I knew I needed to have some kind of a sunken city theme happening. So I started researching sunken cities, and I was surprised that there are sunken city myths all over the world. And I found this story about a place called the City of the Seven Pagodas. And a pagoda is like a temple. And when Marco Polo was traveling around the world, he had written in his writings that there was a beautiful city on the west coast of India that had 7 golden pagodas. And nobody knew what he was talking about because nobody said, well, where is that city? Nobody knows. And so fishermen had talked about that city over and over again, that there was a beautiful city once, but now it was under the water. And fishermen would go out and fish and tell stories about, sunken treasure under the water. And so I was fascinated by this. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And I started exploring more, and I found out that when the tsunami hit the west coast of India in 2004, the ocean receded off the shore like a couple miles, and everybody's like, well, what are those big things in the water? And they found statues and ruins, and they discovered that the city called Mahabalipuram, I think that's how you say it, was actually where those 7 pagoda cities, the 7 cities of the 7 pagodas were, where it was, and it had been sunk under the waters. They only had one temple left, and it was called the Shore Temple. It was right on the beach. And so I knew that's where I needed to set my 3rd book. So in Tiger's Voyage, we get to go on a beautiful mega yacht, which is fancier than your average yacht. And it's got like 5 levels and a swimming pool, and it's, whatever richest things you can think of. And we travel all the way around the continent of India and up to that city. And then we go start heading towards each of these pagodas. And at each pagoda, they find a dragon. And I found a story about the dragons of the 5 oceans. And so each of my dragons is an Asian dragon, so they don't have wings. They're all water dragons. And they have to accomplish something at each pagoda, or defeat the dragon, or face something a challenge the dragon gives them. And so Tiger's Voyage is my favorite book of the series so far, because I love the ocean. It intrigues me and it frightens me. And so all of the scary creatures are like super scary for me. And all of the magical, wonderful things about the water are in there too. And plus we have, our love triangle is really steaming up the pages in book 3. So I'm excited for you guys to read Tiger's Voyage. I think it's going to be the best of the series so far. So that's exciting. Okay, so if we have no more questions, then I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. And thank you all for coming, and it's been very exciting to have you guys here. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.